want to talk to you about the biggest opportunities. This is the year where artificial intelligence went mainstream. I was at Dell World earlier on this year, and Pat Gelsinger was on stage, and he came up with a really nice line. He said, you know, I was at Intel like 30 years ago, and we were working on artificial intelligence. And forgive me if I don't quote him exactly for the journalists in the room, I'm sure you can look the quote up, but he said something like, for 29 years nothing happened, and now it's all happened in the last 12 months. And some things that we are doing today that we've never done before. This speech is being recognized via a Microsoft Azure service and automatically translated into English, and then using another service to translate that into any language. That is artificial intelligence live in our business. I've talked to you about facial recognition, again, where China leads, changing many, many businesses. And you've also seen in various email services and messaging apps this rather nice feature where it's reading the message and suggesting how you reply. Their replies aren't quite this funny yet, but you're seeing the arrival of artificial intelligence. It's absolutely happening. Sometimes we're skeptical about the claims of new technology, but artificial intelligence is here and real. Now, artificial intelligence hasn't done everything people promised. The big bets aren't working. It hasn't cured cancer yet, for example, and it may take decades until it makes progress. The big bets haven't come off, but the small bets are working. Things like chatbots, and perhaps the best example I can give you is inside your sales teams and inside your inside sales teams who are on the phone. You can now obviously transcribe those telephone calls, monitor the performance of the sales reps, and learn which techniques are winning and which techniques are not winning. And now, when your sales rep is on the phone, it can be listening to the conversation and suggesting, why don't you try this line? Why don't you suggest this product? Etc. You can use artificial intelligence not to replace humans, but to augment humans and to help them and get information to them fast. Artificial intelligence, we absolutely recommend you back. You use it internally. You talk to your customers about how they can use it inside their business. It's real, but it's not perfect. And I want to share a little story in my own personal travel life earlier on this year. I was taking quite an unusual flight from Bangkok to Nantong in China. There's only one flight a day, and it's on a cheap airline. My colleague booked the flight for me, Nok Air. It's a cheap airline. That's the email they sent my colleague. Clearly, those of you who know, Bangkok has two airports. They're quite far apart. Don Muang, that's what it clearly says. Outlook, conveniently, reads the emails automatically. It's a very useful feature, and puts that flight in my diary for me, so we don't have to do any data entry. Except for Outlook got the airport wrong. So I went to the wrong airport. And on a Monday morning, these are about 2 hours apart, and I obviously missed my flight and missed my lunch with Alonso if he's in the room. So artificial intelligence is very good, but not perfect. But when I missed that flight, it set me thinking. This wasn't my mistake. I did what Outlook told me. It wasn't my colleague's mistake who booked the flight, because we use this system all the time. It wasn't Nok Air's fault. Their email was correct. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, whose fault is this? It's probably Microsoft's fault. But can I go to Microsoft and say, can you give me a refund on the flight, please? I don't think so. And even worse, how can I even tell Microsoft they've got a problem so that other people aren't going to be sent to the wrong airport? I don't know of any other way, and no one I've asked knows of any other way. It will continue to make this mistake because there's no way to tell it was wrong. And then you think that, that's my little story, but artificial intelligence obviously can have much greater consequences of mistakes. And the collapse of the tragic accidents with the Boeing MAX plane earlier on this year, with the plane telling the pilots what to do and overruling the pilots. And I think we can argue that was the first mass murder by artificial intelligence. So the progress is phenomenal. Absolutely back it. The big bets aren't working. Use it to augment humans, not replace humans, and it will obviously get better and better. Now, into the predictions. We didn't predict last year that Xerox would make a bid to buy HP. It would have been a great prediction, but it was so unlikely that a company that's a third the size of HP would try and buy it. But obviously there is a battle now going on between the investor groups. We don't know what will happen, obviously. I don't think anyone knows. But once these battles start, normally something happens. So we would expect now it's likely there will either be a merger with Xerox, maybe HP buys Xerox, Xerox buys HP, or some other bidder comes in, but that a significant event happens in the next 12 months to HP seems likely. Next prediction. Google Cloud is very much the third of the public cloud providers. They need to catch up. They're incredibly rich. We would expect them to buy one hardware and or software company, big major hardware or software companies, within 12 months. Google needs a customer base, an install base. And Google needs you, the channel. And it needs to do it fast. And the best way for it to achieve that is to make some major acquisitions. And they are plenty rich enough to do that. Next prediction. I talked about the battleground for control of the multi-cloud environment. But the SD-WAN is the other key battleground area. Cisco very much the leader, but VMware, ever since it bought Nicira, catching up and on Cisco's tail in terms of control of the SD-WAN. Cisco coming at it from a proprietary hardware point of view, VMware coming at it from an application point of view. VMware and Cisco, remember VCE, they used to be partners. They are not partners right now. So an easy prediction is you will not see these two people on the same stage by the end of 2021. That is the second big battleground in the industry, and VMware is clearly a threat to Cisco in this very lucrative and pivotal part of the industry. Something I think this prediction many of you in the room will think is obvious. But around the world, people don't think this is obvious. Most people in the West underestimate how advanced China is in many technology areas. And we would expect within 3 years, Chinese companies to be the leaders in artificial intelligence, smart cities, 5G, exascale computing, and microfinance. And arguably, they already are the leaders in some of these spaces. For most of you sitting across Asia, you're going to face some choices. Do we go down the American path or the Chinese path? Or can we manage both, as Singapore, for example, will certainly do? The level of innovation in China is phenomenal. The impact of the trade war, particularly on Huawei, has been for Huawei to reduce its dependency on American components inside the smartphone and almost take all American components out of the smartphone, forcing them to do the innovation locally. So it may well be that the impact of the trade war is to accelerate Chinese innovation, and that may hit the US back in 3 or 4 years' time. I talked to you 3 years ago about China introducing a social credit score for people, looking at their digital activity and rating them on their behavior and compliance. And for example, I think the joke I gave you there was if your rating wasn't high enough in terms of your behavior on the internet, or you'd sent some political messages, or you were friends of someone who had sent political messages, you wouldn't be able to get on the dating sites, for example. You might not be able to get a visa to leave the country, for example. That has been going on. And again, everything that's presented about China is always presented in the West as a sinister thing. But actually the idea that people are identifiable on the internet rather than anonymous would be a good thing and would stop a lot of the abuse that goes on Facebook and Twitter because people are hiding behind names that aren't genuine. So it's part of what they're trying to do is the right thing in China. So anyway, I talked about social credit scores for people, and now they've launched social credit scores for companies. So every company is going to be rated on things like how quickly it pays its bills and other activities that it takes place with. And the employee's social credit score will partly depend on which company they work for. Innovation, always slightly worrying about the loss of privacy and freedom, but also very interesting in terms of how it can control. So look out for social credit for companies to become a thing in China and then maybe export elsewhere. And that brings me to the end of the presentation with one final recommendation. This is perhaps particularly for India, but does apply everywhere. Retailing around the world has been devastated by the rise of internet shopping, online commerce, and online marketplaces. There is a disparity in the taxation systems between retail companies with physical premises and the internet companies. And I wanted to highlight here, because I think it's a very good idea, some idea that's been presented in the French government. Very simple. The way to rebalance the economy, but also to charge internet companies for the infrastructure they use in a country, because they send trucks on roads. They can create congestion. They create pollution, all of which is a state-provided service, and somehow they need to contribute to those costs. And it was a very simple idea, and one that couldn't be hidden by moving money from one country into another, which is to charge these companies $1 for every delivery they make in terms of taxation. It's easy to audit. It would apply to the country, maybe to the state that they take those deliveries in. It would force consumers perhaps to think about, do I really just need to buy a $5 item on the internet, or shall I wait and put that in my shopping basket and receive it in 3 weeks' time when I make my next order and put everything together, reducing the congestion, reducing the pollution. It seems totally fair, logical. Maybe even the likes of Alibaba and Amazon would support it in terms of it's fair and auditable and treats everyone equally. We need to do something to tax the digital age, the best idea we've heard. If you can all talk about it and journalists write about it, maybe, just maybe, we get a groundswell of opinion to change some politics around the world and provide that very fair rebalancing. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd now like to welcome Rachel back on stage.